Hey everyone, I'm Madonna. This is David, and we thought we'd chat about ADHD and the way that we bring different things to the table because of the different ways we've trained and learn about things.
So maybe rather than with specifically ADHD, you want to talk about the scientific process for establishing how we look at things,
Yeah, so
using ADHD as an
as an
example.
example, yeah, that's right.
Mhm.
Because what I tend to do as a naturopath kinesiologist of 30 years, when I'm taking someone's history, I'm listening to everything they're saying, as people do. You know, this is a job of any therapist. What a
Mhm.
surprise. But I do find that when you're younger and less experienced, it's easy to grab onto something really early on
Mm.
in the consult and decide that that's the be all and end all factor.
Right.
And as soon as you do that, you lose curiosity.
hmm
And the thing about being a practitioner to get the best for your clients, you need to be curious
And remain curious.
and remain curious. Exactly. So, for example, I had a client a few weeks ago, and this is a bit embarrassing to admit as someone who has been helping people with heavy metal poisoning for many, 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 many years. So, this client who I've been seeing for a long, 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 long time, uh, there were all these heavy metals showing up in her bioresonance. She started getting these outbreaks all over her body. And we were both sort of looking at the, can I say, the new vogue stuff to do with heavy metal poisoning that's out there as opposed to old fashioned things like house pipes and things.
Right.
So, you know, there's a lot of heavy metals in the atmosphere. There's a lot of heavy metals in people's pharmaceuticals. There's a lot of heavy metals in our foods.
It might be in the drinking water
In the
too.
drinking water, the air, yeah, that sort of thing. So, what it ended up being was that her house was at a certain level where the pipes were deteriorating.
Right.
And when they looked at the parts per million of their piping,
Mm.
it was huge. It was huge. So I did apologize to her the next time I saw her. I went, damn, I have to think, you know, naturopathy 101. Where's the heavy metals coming from? Because honestly, when I was looking at her bioresonance, every time it was tin, it was silver, it was copper, it was, you
Mm.
know, so it can be in the cans if we're eating canned food.
Mm.
It can be in the air we're breathing. It can be in, you know, because there's lots of things everywhere.
Mm.
You know, even things like there's a lot of antacids that still have aluminium in them. You know, so people can be getting, there's on average about 6 heavy metals every time we're eating canned
Well,
food.
all of the water all of the water we're drinking, and that which goes into manufacturing food too,
Yes.
they come out of water sources that are, dams,
Yeah.
and they're filled with what drains in from the local rivers, and
Yeah.
they have the pesticides, industrial, all types of things, and
Exactly.
so our body's becoming maybe less resilient
Yeah.
because
Well,
there's
the
an
toxins are
ongoing
building up. You
yeah,
know, the
because there's
toxins
an
are building
ongoing
up.
battle, isn't there, by the government to
Yes.
actually try to clean things up on one hand, which
Yes.
they're always trying to do, and on the other hand, trying to work
Based
out,
on what they believe is going on.
well, but
Yeah.
and also what they can afford.
Yeah.
Like you can see in Western countries, because we can afford a bit more things, or at least superficially,
Yeah.
cleaner. Whereas some countries, like the pollution's,
Yeah.
serious, very
Yeah, so
serious.
you can imagine if you've got heavy metals, and once again, we're not sure whether this is the correct way or not, whether this is backwards. To us, this board is backwards, by the way.
Mm.
So, for example, with ADHD, you know, is that, and this is what I said to David before we started, is it a symptom or is it the diagnosis?
hmm
As soon as you make it the diagnosis, you can miss a lot of this stuff
Mm.
because the diagnosis closes off curiosity to a certain extent. Now, I know that as a holistic counselor, you will absolutely look at things like, you know, traumas and their ACE score and, you know, abuse and friendships and family, you know. So, as a holistic counselor, this will be delved into hugely,
hmm
you know, so they go, holy moly, well, no wonder ADHD is a result of what happened here because it can be part of a ongoing trauma patterning.
What's interesting with ADHD that I definitely know is that because what counsellors do is like a bit different from what naturopaths will do
Yes.
and what doctors will do. Because working out ADHD, there's no biological testing.
No, that's right.
It's all
Well, that it used to be like from a naturopathic perspective, the
right,
panels that we would do would automatically be heavy metals. So that's why I got
right.
the oligo scan, you know, and it's why I got the bioresonance because I love both of those for heavy metal. I
Mm,
did urine testing for heavy metals for a long time. So I've always been interested in heavy metals since I went to New York and listened like 25 years ago to some a couple of toxicologists in the States.
Mm.
And so I've been very, very aware. The higher the levels of heavy metal that can cross the blood-brain barrier, the more likely we are with all of this stuff as well. OCD, ODD, the neurospicy, the resilience. So what were we talking about yesterday, David? The
rejection sensitivity dysphoria.
Even that can be linked in with heavy metals, because any toxins that hits our nerves can mess with our resilience, because things just aren't, working properly in the brain the way they're supposed to. So we're more likely to whip into a trauma really easily. So heavy metals has always been big on my hit list of things to check out.
But back to how they work the diagnostics out there, all behavioural. And what I find interesting about that is that because I've been through this with one of my kids with ADHD, and basically the screening test is mainly written from the teachers at school.
Right.
And then parents' contribution, because ADHD has to appear in more than one environment. If it's just at home or just school, it doesn't count. So you have to find the symptoms manifesting in different environments.
Yes, absolutely.
And a lot of the symptoms are social symptoms.
Yeah.
So somebody appearing with ADHD symptoms, which are fairly clear, they might have something else actually. If you look, like for example, my counselling supervisor says in a lot of cases, people with ADHD, you should consider a differential diagnosis with with complex trauma from growing up, because the same type of thing happens at the prefrontal cortex. The executive functioning breaks down.
Yes.
And you might end up with learning difficulties. And because the thing is where a lot of the symptoms for this are actually social and behavioural.
Yeah.
Right.
And isn't this the thing with the sexual dysregulation, with the...
Well, that's with OCD, like in the diagnostic statistics manual that we use, there's often comorbidities that go with different... Right. So ADHD, for example, has a whole range of comorbidities that go with it. Generally, it's very, very commonly diagnosed with ASD, autism, and also OCD, but also oppositional defiance disorder, which becomes that's really a behavioural thing too, because kids with ADHD get constantly brought to attention.
Yeah.
So they're just sick of authorities. They just don't want to be told what to do anymore.
Yeah.
And so, so there's a lot of, and there's a sexual component with OCD, especially in ADHD. With OCD, it's a fixation thing.
So that's
interesting when you read it.
Yeah.
And with ADHD, it can be a ultra sexualized thing, or
because they get the dopamine hit from that, or they get the love and connection, or they get...
You've got to watch particular videos on it. It's like a some of it's over sexualized, like the data that's come out. There's particular researchers that will look into it.
Yeah.
And
because I've been quite
shy to talk about it online.
Oh, look, yeah. Well, I know that I've had some young people the last few years, and I don't understand the thinking of things like, wanting to allow full nudity, for example, on their Instagram pages. I don't understand that want for a young person to,
no, but the sexual stuff happening online is just not a good. What do you mean?
Well, it just feels very, like she says she does it because she's a feminist, or she wants to do it because she's a feminist, and I think, okay, so. Anyway, it just seems odd to me. But I was thinking with the prefrontal cortex, with kids with gender dysphoria, for example, didn't that study come out of the UK that shows that when they're given these drugs earlier and earlier, it actually shuts down the prefrontal cortex as well. So it actually stops the ability to frame. Yeah, that SAGE report or something out of the UK.
I've had a few friends with strong gender dysphoria.
Yeah.
And when it's happening, it's quite a substantial reality, but they've all been young adults and that type of thing.
Yeah.
And then there's some, but also with that, so as a counsellor these days, we just have to say that we do affirmation care as much as possible. And so it's harder with something like gender dysphoria to pull this apart.
Right.
But often they find that, and it's hard because on the internet it's hard to. We're limited what we're allowed to say as counsellors,
absolutely.
because we're dealing with a particular thing in society that's really quite
political.
Political, yeah.
Yeah.
Except my experience in the art world is that I knew, especially guys, I knew a few gay guys who had gender dysphoria.
Oh,
And it was
absolutely.
really quite, and in that world, it's fully accepted, and it's just this thing that happens.
But over here in Birkdale, there's a little girl who's 5 years old who has had her breast removed, and I just see that as criminal. But anyway, let's move on. So, so one of the things that I see with, when I'm sort of looking at how someone has become something, because I don't believe we're born with ADHD. And I know some of the top researchers say, and I know this is the statistics show that, generally the mother or the father or both can have ADHD as well, which is absolutely, two can be truthful at the same time, by the way.
Which is really common.
Yeah, but the microbiome, the heavy metals, these can come through mother and father.
Yeah,
the drug residue, so whatever that medication treatment protocol. So, for example, they know that if mums are on antidepressants or antipsychotics or anti-anxiety drugs during the birth, we're more likely to end up with neurospicy kids.
Right.
So there's all sorts of things like that that are known out in there, but people need to do what they need to do.
But that's not untrue, because they say that if it's considered genetic.
Yes.
Okay, so if
I would say epigenetic rather than genetic, because 100 years ago this did not exist. So therefore it's not genetic, it's epigenetic. It's what's happening in the environment. It's what's happening in the environment that's changing the gene output.
Right.
And the fact that you can reverse it in people makes it non-genetic.
Right.
So if you give them the right herbs, the right nutrients, the right counselling, the right tools, the right sunshine, the right exercise, the right diet, get them eating cleanly, get them eating whole foods, get them eating, sort of dealing with their traumas, and they start to reverse the ADHD, that takes away the belief that it's genetic.
Well,
because that's epigenetics. You can change epigenetics.
Okay. It's just that, like, my look at the studies is that what they say is the first generation happens from toxification at time of conception.
Yep.
Right. So, and they talk about lead being that component, but obviously lead.
It can be aluminium or mercury or barium or anything.
Well, why
but
lead?
They have to focus on one thing.
Yeah, except so what does lead do is that it breaks down the central nervous system.
So does aluminium, so does mercury.
No. The point I'm making is that if somebody's central nervous system is inhibited, then the brain function will be inhibited.
Yep.
And the prefrontal cortex is the thing that ends up being disabled mainly with ADHD.
Yeah.
And so therefore, if there's an increase in toxic residue everywhere, it makes sense that, because I think this argument's okay, and I don't know. It's just that people want something that makes sense to them.
Yeah.
Because ADHD, which is not dealt with, becomes a really intense thing because it becomes internalized over time, the social events.
Yeah.
And so as a counsellor, I'm always looking at the social side more. And really, does it really matter? Because like we started, we're presented with a range of symptoms.
Yes.
Right? And it really doesn't. The reason why it might be important that it gets determined one thing over another is because that means that there'll be a different treatment protocol.
Yeah.
Right. And so a treatment protocol
from your perspective, whereas it's not from my perspective.
That's what I mean. So what's interesting about this is counsellors' treatment protocol options are different from naturopaths' treatment protocol
which are different from psychologists, which are different from psychiatrists and doctors. Yeah.
And so because what happens is that, so with ADHD, the first part of the protocol is generally, I think the best protocol is parenting training first.
Yeah.
And the reason is because when people go through the diagnostics of ADHD, they end up paying a lot of money, and they have hardly any information.
Yeah.
And so the first phase of ADHD thing for me is actually getting the parents up to date on what all the main theories are out there, what the likely comorbidities are, and what the trajectory is. Because whether we can treat it or not or get on top of it, even the treatments are expensive, whichever route we take, we've got an extra cost. And so when we've got a kid with ADHD, we've got a bit of a lifelong commitment that we have to take into account. And so the first step's getting the parenting, having the options of information available to them, what they can do and be like a co-therapist.
Do you remember my story about the non-verbal autistic kids? So there was a doctor down in Melbourne going, and this is a seminar I was at maybe 10 years ago or something like that. And he was this lovely guy who had accidentally become an autism specialist only because he fell across a dietary process that worked. So what he was looking at was firstly the microbiome and the villi in the intestines, and he found that just about with all of the kids, the neurospicy kids, the little villi in the intestines were dying.
Right.
And the villi are really important because they're the ones that release enzymes. So the shorter and more munted they are, the less enzymes they release, the less foods we can digest.
Right, and you need the enzymes to actually make our neuroreceptors work.
Oh, enzymes are the stuff of life. So nothing works without enzymes.
Like dopamine, which is what we've got a deficiency in ADHD.
Absolutely. So these and the things that we know that destroy these faster than anything else, things like painkillers, things like antibiotics, lots of medications, lots of jibbity jabs, as well as things like genetically modified gluten, as well as dairy that's got genetically modified milk because of the gluten that the cows are eating. Obviously, they give them all sorts of things like high fructose corn syrup and lots of things, in the feedlots to, build them up. So there can be terrible milk if we're not eating or drinking organically. Same with the breads and things like that. So these kids are often addicted to things like cheese sandwiches, which gives them a massive hit of, it's like a gliadin opioid. So gliadin is another thing like gluten that's in wheat, but it's the addictive component.
Right, and that's interesting because from a counselling point of view, they found that because of the shortage of dopamine often in ADHD kids, not all, but what happens is they overeat because they anticipate getting a 5 satisfaction, but they only get a 2.
Yeah.
So they need to eat, I need to eat a whole packet of Bickies.
Yeah.
To get 10 Bickies to get 3 dopamine hits, whereas normal people would get 3 dopamine hits from 3 Bickies.
Yeah.
And it's a cycle of hormonal, then you put on weight, and then you're creating
and that abdominal fat becomes the major endocrine organ of the body. So it switches down our feel-good stuff and it switches up our inflammatory stuff and it switches, we're more likely, anyway. So it does, it really messes with our hormones. So this guy ended up, finding a way, which was getting rid of dairy, getting rid of milk, getting rid of grains, getting rid of corn, getting rid of sugar, getting rid of anything white, so white
which
flour.
Which is hard for adults to do, nearly impossible to get.
No, you can do it. So these kids were coming back verbal.
Yeah.
And then the parents, guess what they'd say? When can we go back to a normal diet?
Yeah.
So they'd had non-verbal children that had it reversed by the diet.
Yeah.
But the parents just want to go back to normal and go, well, do you want your child to keep speaking?
Well, see, but and changing diet, very, very hard for anybody.
Oh, I throw my hat in the ring with this one.
It is hard because
I have clients who have done it and reversed kids with lots and lots of stuff.
Yeah.
It can be bloody well done.
Often people
That's an excuse. It's an excuse.
Well, but sometimes you need to be thrown up against the wall before you change your diet. You need a heart attack.
Yeah, well, that's what happens, isn't it? People only come to me once they've been to 27 PDE.
Well, I changed my diet after I had a heart attack. I have an excellent diet.
Yeah, whole foods. And we were talking about the blue zones.
Process at home.
Yeah, we were talking about the blue zones a few weeks ago, and because you're vegetarian, you've seen the studies that lots of vegetarians, there's lots of it raises longevity. But what the blue zones thing actually shows us is that it does not matter what diet it is, as long as people have spirituality, they are active, working in the community, they have a good social family, not religious, but spiritual connection to the earth and the land. They eat whole foods because it doesn't matter, so in places like Sardinia, I think they have a really high carb diet. I think it's Sardinia, really high carb diet. They have oodles of centenarians. They have places in Japan that have high fat and mostly fish and, things like that. Really high longevity levels. Obviously, the vegetarians outside LA, really well known for having lots of longevity. So it doesn't matter what the diet is. The common thing with all of these is whole foods.
Yeah.
Whole foods, locally grown. And so it didn't matter. And I know there's that. The whole vegetarian whole food thing is awesome, but doesn't seem to matter from a longevity perspective when you look at the blue zones, which is really cool. So the whole of the food. So if your kid's eating bread, make the bread yourself. Know what's going into it.
So one thing with diet that I found really interesting, like, because I had to change my diet completely.
Yeah.
What I did differently from everybody else is that generally people go, stop eating these foods.
Yeah.
I went, I'm now eating these foods.
Yes.
So I changed in a positive way. And the first one was chickpeas.
Yeah.
Because I just looked up and go, what are the best foods for heart health? And
yeah.
Chickpeas came up on top of everything.
Yeah. And
it
is funny
because... So now I'm like, now I eat a chickpea-based diet, and I hardly ever ate them before. Now I'm like, soaking chickpeas every 3 days to make new hummus.
Well, one of the best things you can do, like even if you don't change anything else, get rid of white flour, white sugar, white rice.
Yeah,
so you get rid of those things, for even 3 months.
Cut out the white things.
Yeah, and if you are aware every time you're looking at ingredients and going, I'm not having anything with white sugar, white flour or white rice in it, you'll eliminate 60, because 67% of the diet in the States is ultra refined food.
Right,
we are nearly there in Australia as well.
Yeah, so back to like this how to change diet.
Yeah.
This idea of, so it's actually what people have difficult with is finding out what to eat instead.
Well, that's why they see a naturopath.
No, but this is an information session.
Yeah. So, yes.
No, but what to eat instead. So what I did is I just looked up the best foods.
Yeah.
And you end up with all the self-purifying vegetables.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's like, oh, all right. So you buy those things.
Yeah.
So when you're trying to, so you do, I cut out all sugar and white flour and, for like 4 or 5 months now, happily. But it was because of the replacement.
Yeah.
Right? Because in addiction too, these days they're more and more working with replacement therapy. And I think diet's another place where replacement therapy is important. What are you replacing with? Like, for example, a lot of foods, if you've got ADHD, have L-tyrosine and other things that help produce dopamine.
Yeah, absolutely.
And clean omega oils. Do you know what I mean? Which you can get in vegetarian from seeds and nuts and this, and they have fish oil in.
Yeah. Not vegetable oils. They're really bad for us, and they just destroy our cell membranes.
Yeah, you're better off eating whole seeds, like eating
if you don't have oxalate issues.
Pumpkins, and most people don't. A minority of people.
1 in 8 people have got oxalate issues, David.
Oh, which is a minority?
Well, shit, it's a lot of people.
Well, okay. Well, anyway.
It's a lot of people on the planet.
But the thing is, but for general, but people will be able to eat some seeds, and because they're full of omega oils, all the sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds, good nuts like walnuts especially, really high in omegas. And it's just that there's all these. It's just that what I'm saying is that the replacement part's really important.
Yeah.
What are you going to eat instead?
Yeah.
And so, because the parents who want to go back to the way they before, they haven't worked out what are you going to eat instead.
Yeah. And
something that they're happy with and something the kid's happy with. Because you're right, a lot of kids, ADHD, they just want to eat pizza.
Yeah. yeah. And again, if you're making your pizza yourself,
yeah.
Heaps better. You've got control over these things. It does take a little bit of extra time, but how many people go and sit down in front of the TV for 4 hours every night?
Mm-hmm.
So there is time. It doesn't take that long to make something. I have a Thermomix. I really love it. But, it's sort of...
Well, my little boy, he's 12 and he makes his own pizza and he makes the dough. He just gets flour and he just does it. Pretty incredible.
Mm.
And he makes
And you buy good flour from Mixed Nuts?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, because you can get organic flour and that makes all the difference, not having flour that's been covered in glyphosate, which destroys the villi in the intestines again. And that creates leaky brain. And leaky brain allows toxins like any of our medical residue and our heavy metals and things like that to cross the blood-brain barrier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they're also rich carbohydrates too. So they're because generally in a good diet where you want to work on your weight, you want the protein and the fat to be more than the carbohydrates.
Absolutely.
And you can work out on all the per 100 grams in the
and I say to my, and this is where the whole replacement theory is, every single day I talk to my clients and I say, every meal you need to think, where's my protein, where's my fat?
Yeah.
Every single meal.
And the only reason I talk about that, because that way you're thinking about what you are going to eat rather than what you're not going to eat.
Exactly. And I think that's incredibly important.
If they do it with smoking too, when people give up cigarettes now, it's like they recommend having all the different nicotine things to actually so that you don't freak out and become a maniac.
Yeah. Well,
Because,
how many people are, I know non-smokers now using nicotine patches for all sorts of things. One of my mates he's a kinesiologist, but he's got a nasty neurological thing. He's been using little nicotine patches and getting some improvement in his neurological stuff as a non-smoker.
Well, I've forgotten about that, but they're trying to make ADHD medications out of nicotine now.
Right. Well, funnily enough, that's probably
milder,
safer than a lot of the, other things.
It's a much milder stimulant.
And same with CBD oil. Yeah, and Gary Brecker again.
CBD oil.
Yeah. Well, because it calms the brain, So with ADHD, there's too much thoughts, and we're not getting rid of it. The thoughts there's not enough downtime.
Three conversations going at once.
Yeah.
Like really.
So it's like, I love your shirt. Look at that yellow flower. Oh my God, look at those flowers. Oh, that reminds me of when I went to Australia Zoo the other day. Oh, did I tell you that I took the 4 little cousins down there? Oh my God, one of them stood on a, it just goes on and on. Yeah, exactly. Like, that's like my favorite thing when anyone says, for me to meditate, and I sort of laugh at them because I've never meditated properly in my life.
If it's not genetic, why does it appear
so
much in common in
Well,
family?
now because of our same diet, our same upbringing, our same traumas, our same heavy metals, our same genetic pathways, our same medications.
And our same generational trauma patterns.
Yeah, all of that. So yeah, of course, but it didn't exist 100 years ago. So that's the thing that says it's not genetic. It's epigenetic. Oh, bullshit. That's what everyone says. It's just rubbish. So it's epigenetic because it's changed. It's increased. I've watched it for 30 years increasing. So it's something that, because I've been doing brain integration for 25 years.
Oh, but also it's in the studies. I mean, there's a lot of studies out that show it's increasing.
Yeah.
And it's increasing to, what is it now?
Dramatically.
They even admit it's like 11%, between 7 and 11% of people. And that's a big group of people, because even if you put all the people with negative personality disorders like psychopaths and narcissists, all together they make up 8%.
Right.
But ADHD is 11%.
Yeah, right.
And if it's not treated, it can manifest as similar intensity to those things. Especially if you've got the rejection sensitivity things.
And one of the things that I was listening to a Jordan Peterson interview this morning, and one of the things she was talking about the whole medication trajectory is that when you're a young doctor, she was saying that what would be great in her hospital was that if you were her client, you had a heart attack, she would be woken up at 1 o'clock in the morning to treat you because you were her client. Right. They took away in hospitals you being her client. So you would be whoever's client there was at the time. So therefore, young doctors weren't seeing the history and the trajectory of that health condition.
Especially in the hospital system.
So they learn from that. They go, what has he done to allow, he's been my client for a couple of years. Why did he have this heart now? And then they could go back and look at the medications and look at this and look at that.
One way to do it is to make sure that everything goes to have a good GP and make sure everyone goes through them.
Well,
because you can force that. Like I just say, because I've had some hospital things, they go, I'll go through my GP and we'll sort it out there.
Yeah, right.
And she
I don't have a GP. But anyway.
My GP overrides what the hospital said.
Yeah.
And, it was really good with something.
Anyway, time for lunch now. So so I think that's generally a bit of a thing about the difference in the way that we work.
But also it's a cluster of symptoms, like in the DSM.
What sort of cluster is it?
Symptoms. Did I get it wrong? No, but at the bottom of the diagnostics in the psychological, it says unless can be explained by something better.
Right, yeah.
More or less, because often over time, like especially something with ADHD, it clusters with other comorbidities. So it's like very hard. Like it might turn out to be starting like this, but then it might be this.
Yes.
And in that case, the treatment requirements are a little bit different, because obviously, the same with metabolic health. If you're looking at something and you think the cause is this, and then over time you realize the cause is this, you have to change the treatment protocol, because it's coming from a different...
I'll tell you a little. I had a lady on the table yesterday, and this is a woman who, she exercises, she eats impeccably, she doesn't drink, she's like water, purified all the time. She, but the weight isn't shifting. Now, she looks amazing, and she's a fully solid, beautiful woman, but but it's giving you the willies because, you know, potentially perimenopausal and just going, yeah, I don't like the way this is going. This trajectory of my health is not what I want it to be. And when we muscle tested up the priority, the first priority was Brock shots, you know, so that's a sulforaphane yielding product, but it has massive doses. So you'd have to eat like 22 cauliflower in a sitting to get what it does in one serve. Now, what that does is switches on the epigenetics associated with pro-detoxing and anti-inflammatory. So that was the first priority. Now, that's what's been studied, the anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory and pro-detox sort of pathways, but it probably does a whole bunch more stuff as well. And again, I said to her, well, I don't know why your body needs this because you do so well. She's a whole food eater. She meditates. She does all the right stuff. Anyway, so that was the first priority. The second priority was supporting her thyroid, but with a tiny touch. It only wanted for you 2 thyrobalance a day. So that's nothing. If someone's got bad thyroid issues, I'll have them on 6 a day for the first month, you know, to give them a real, you know, energetic boost. And then the third priority, though, was the glucofactors. Now, the glucofactors that we've got, it's got a whole bunch of bitters in it. So, you know, like bitter melon and cinnamon but bitters, what they do is stimulate the bitter receptors in the gut. And the bitter receptors, we have 17 times more sweet stuff in our diet than we do bitter. And those bitter receptors get left alone. They don't get activated.
It's not in the Western diet. It's in all of the Asian diets. It's in the Indian diet, and like there's a lot of bitter stuff.
Because everything's sweet. Like even carbohydrates like chips and crackers and stuff like that, even though they're not sweet, they turn into sugar. They convert to sugar. So basically it was really interesting because when we looked at it, I said, well, I don't know why this is what your body wants. First priority is opening up those pathways. So what it's doing is flipping our genes because they've been changed by epigenetics of some thing. And then it was funny because right at the end, she made some comment about always having been very masculine. And I went, oh, so I quickly whacked her back on the table. We were nearly finished and I made sure her center of gravity was in, but it wasn't. It was off on the masculine side. So I centered her gravity. And then she made some comment about having been named after her uncle. So quickly made a note in my thing to make sure she's 100% aligned with her name next time. Because as a kid, you know, you're named after your uncle who had died before you were born on a motorbike accident. So there's all, you know, there's all this energetic attachment to something that has nothing to do with you that can create trauma about your name, which you're called how many times per day. So it can be like this subconscious, unconscious thing going on in there. I know. So, and anyway, so I quickly wrote, oh, make sure the name is okay next time.
You know, so many health problems come out of our childhood.
Oh, so many, absolutely.
And even if it's not that bad, it's like just because of the adverse childhood experience, they were able to work out the trajectory from childhood trauma and neglect and how it manifests into future health problems. So all of that stuff's always relevant.
So you can go online.
You can work it out yourself. And,
you can go online and check out ACE. What do you look up? ACE study, ACE score, ACE
adverse childhood
events.
And there's an ACE questionnaire that's available online.
So that's a fun thing to do. The other thing is the Moro reflex. I've got a few videos about the Moro reflex, but basically there's an exercise you can do that takes you a minute morning and night, and it helps to reconnect the frontal cortex to the rear of the brain if it's been disconnected because of trauma before 4 months old. So if your mum was anxious during the birth, if something traumatic happened, you know, during the birthing process, or, you know, if you're rejected because you're the wrong sex, or, you know, all sorts of fun things happen. So
you put like nutrients, B vitamins, magnesium, NAC,
and
minerals.
Sometimes it can be the synthetic B vitamins causing ADHD. So, for example, folate. So folate is synthetically created in a lab. You know, so a lot of people go on folate. They think they're doing the right thing in pregnancies. You know, it's added to all sorts of, you know, nutrient-enriched cereals and things like that. So if there's B vitamins in your cereals, that's not real B vitamins. You know, that is a synthetic, nasty, lab-grown something. So the only B vitamins I use these days.
So if you've got a B deficiency, that'll make ADHD.
Well, for a start, you've got to get the synthetic Bs out. So every time you're eating something that's synthetically made, you know, whether it's cereals or Bickies or something, you've got to have a look at it and see whether it's got synthetic B vitamins in there, because that can be causing neurological issues like ADHD, OCD, ODD, neurospicy stuff.
Overprocessed food.
Oh, overprocessed. But these horrible, horrible, horrible synthetic vitamins can be in them.
Right.
You need methylated Bs when you're having them. And I think we've chatted before, sometimes the B1, what's the activated version of B1? Bentotiamide or something like that. But sometimes if people have 800 micrograms a day, it can totally change their OCD or their ADHD or their dementia or Alzheimer's symptoms within a month.
Right.
Because it's a really important nutrient if it's real. But magnesium's crucial. The brain can't calm down without magnesium.
And also magnesium helps to get all your neuroreceptor and hormone receptors working.
Oh, absolutely.
It's
the biggest mineral deficiency on the planet.
And omega oil.
Omega's really important. But NAC, so if we've got OCD, it's a combination of magnesium and NAC that are really important.
NAC, that makes sense.
Yeah, so
because
obsessive compulsive.
NAC helps with addictions. It helps cravings. And OCD people have fixation, so it helps.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And just a reminder that the epigenetics, so again, I don't believe that most things are genetic. I don't believe it at all. Whereas epigenetics makes sense. Epigenetics is the environment, it's the stress, it's the toxicity, it's the environment, it's the friendship, it's the families, and how that affects our genes.
Yeah, that's right.
That's epigenetics.
Right.
And 97% of problems are mineral deficient connected.
Right.
So when you're stressed, you're chewing up minerals. When you're toxic, you're chewing up minerals. When you're eating a poor diet, you're chewing up minerals. When you're having Coca-Cola all the time, you're chewing up minerals. When you're taking medications, you're chewing up your minerals.
Well, all glyphosate depletes minerals from anybody, including a tree or a human. Yep. It actually sucks the minerals out.
Okay. And without wanting to get political, let's hope Bobby gets in and sorts out some of the glyphosate and toxicity issues.
I've had glyphosate poisoning, so just, not too strong, but I certainly looked up what the effects were.
Yeah, absolutely. No. Is that good?
Yes. So that's how, when someone has a condition, it's important to reassess, make sure they've got the right information, because sometimes when people are given the right information, they realize, I haven't explained this properly.
Yeah.
Right, and then they can get even further into it and get to some of the deeper things, like the side effects of having a condition, like.
And the thing is, doctors almost
like socially or
people need to read the side effects of their medication. They need to read them, because it's amazing how many times you put on one medication, there's a side effect. You put on a second, there's another side effect. You put on a third, there's another side effect. Doctors rarely take people off drugs. Unless you complain, people rarely get taken off drugs. I had a client in yesterday, and the poor darling, I realised he's on 2 drugs that are causing his issues. He's not going to go off them because he doesn't have a voice, and his doctors don't listen to him. So, and because he needs the government hospital system, he's stuck in that.
Yeah. And but he's got 2 things people are stuck in the government pay system.
Oh, it's awful.
And you have to stick within the rules to actually get the benefit.
So, I sort of whispered to him, because his carer was out there and I was trying not to let her listen. But I sort of, because they listen in and then they report back, and then they try to take control of people's money away, which is just awful. I've had it happen to several of my clients. But anyway, so I said, anyway. He has neurological issues, and it's one of the drugs I really hate for cholesterol that they've got him on, and he is worsening and worsening and worsening with his Parkinson's every time I see him because of that damn drug. Anyway, and they added mRNA technology to the main Parkinson's drug as well in 2023, so that's very scary. Anyway.
Parkinson's a dopamine partly problem.
What was the movie with Robin Williams about Parkinson's?
I don't know.
It was where he was the doctor with Robert De Niro. So they were in a hospital and he thought he found a cure, and all of a sudden, all of these dementia clients were up and running and active again. But then it dropped.
Well, sometimes we're looking for a silver bullet, and sometimes some things work with some people and not with others.
Absolutely.
And so there's not one size fits all.
No, there's absolutely not. It's 100% true.
Which is why we want to look at, which is why a holistic impression is so important, to get the unique individual characteristics of every client.
So if you're liking the way we've done this, let us know, and we might do a bit of a mishmash before each time we have a chat, and because it only takes and it will again just add to our conversation. So if you like it, let us know, and But this is as organised as we can get, I'm sorry.
That's nice work with the discussion, and it's good for people to understand how things work.
Yeah.
And how to get more out of your treatment.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Mwah.